Hey everybody, welcome to the HireMyVA Team and Business Building Podcast, brought to you by ugozi.com. And in this podcast and at HireMyVA, we help you to reclaim your freedom through hiring and thriving with virtual assistants without breaking the bank, and that means your bank. I'm Dave Braun, and I'm here with Larry, and we ought to get to it. How are you doing, Larry?
If people could only see what happens before we start these recordings, Dave. It's like watching sausage be made.
No. But you know what?
What,
Sausage
Dave?
being made, but sausage tastes good.
Exactly. The outcome is awesome.
We have it in our omelets all the time.
Yes. Well, hello, handsome Dave. How are you? It's great to see you last night with our little clan of warrior guys.
Yeah, it was
fun.
It was awesome in that. So when Andrew came back home, I was talking to him about the food that he fixed, and how we kind of combined a couple of recipes, and it's like, Andrew, you're a star.
Well, I'll tell you, for those folks who have no idea what we're talking about, maybe this is your first time seeing or listening to one of our podcasts. Dave and I have been friends for 20 years at this point, and we've been through some battles, some ups and downs, right? And several years ago, we started meeting with a group of guys, and then we kind of narrowed it down just over a year ago. Is that right?
Over a year and a couple months. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dave and I and two of our very close friends, we get together every Wednesday night just to commune, have a meal together, and hold each other accountable on life. It's a habit that we've built over the years, and you got it, Dave.
Larry, good job.
It's as if I've done this before. And it's a habit that we've built where now we depend on it.
Yeah.
That if we miss a week, which you've only missed a couple over those past 14 months, let's say, we feel off.
Yeah.
Right? And so we depend on it. It's like something's missing from our lives. And so that kind of is a setup for what we're going to be talking about today, Dave. So why don't you introduce our topic and what we're going to be talking about with this episode and a few episodes moving forward?
Yeah, in fact, this is first of a series, and I think it'll be 4. But the question for this one, episode 115, is why are habits important? Yeah. And so we're going to talk about in 116. The next one is how to establish and break habits. The next one after that is we'll talk about like the top habits that we think are important. And Charles Duhigg talks about that as keystone habits. And then in episode 18, we're going to talk about how to even outsource our habits, because that's kind of what we're about here.
Right? Yeah. Hey, Dave, I'm going to have you or ask you to kind of lead these next few. Yeah. You've done a lot of study on this, and you know me, I take pride in deferring when I feel like somebody knows more than I do, because I want to learn on the journey as well. Obviously, I wouldn't have reached any kind of success in my life had I not built habits, whether it's from wrestling in high school or martial arts career or my military career or my entrepreneurial career. Habits are part of life, right? But I know that there are a lot of people who struggle, Dave, just in their day-to-day life. And oftentimes and I've done tons of therapy as well, oftentimes because we haven't developed those keystone habits. And we're going to be talking about it at some point. But so, I mean, there may be some people saying, well, what the heck are you guys even talking about? But, anyone who's had gone through one life cycle is going to tell you that habits are just essential to any kind of health, good health or success. I shouldn't even say good health. Health in general. You may have some bad habits that contribute to your negative health, or you may have bad habits that lead to, I hate to use the word failure in this context, because I think that failure is good if we approach it appropriately. But let's say downward spiral. There can be bad habits that lead to a downward spiral in your life. But habits can break or make your chances of achieving and maintaining any kind of goals, Dave. It's like sticking to an exercise or diet plan, or managing a medical condition, right? But habits are really just a sequence or a series of events where you recognize a cue, you create a good response, and you receive some sort of reward for it. right? I can think about martial arts training, or I can think about time in the military, right? Where there's a cue, somebody goes to throw a punch, right? And if
Right.
you work on it enough, then reflexively you learn how to block and then respond, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I remember the first time, not the first time, but I remember being in the military and learning tactical shooting. One of the things that gets pounded in your head in the beginning is that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. When you get the brain trained to actually just respond reflexively, it frees up a lot of brain work that you have to
Absolutely.
do, right? And I think we're probably
Absolutely.
going to talk about that a little bit more. But I just wanted to kind of lay that groundwork, Dave. Like, what is a habit? Because again, I'm not going to assume that everyone that's on here is 43 years old and a executive VP of an organization. We may have, like, for instance, I know that my got a friend of my son who listens to these, and he's 17 years old. So let's start with the basics there.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
there you
I
have it.
like it. So that's a great definition. Habits are something that we do reflexively, that we do unconsciously, that we don't really have to think about, because once we
Yeah.
get that thinking in there, that causes delays in time. And so there's a
Right.
bunch of reasons why. But
Yeah.
Larry, I think one of the things that is important to give credit where credit's due. And we've got, some of the stuff that I've learned, you've learned.
Mm-hmm.
There's really a few fundamental books out there that I think are
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
One of them I'm going to show right here is called um, Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can see that. Hold on a
Yeah.
second. If you're watching this, or if you're not watching this, I'm holding up the book. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. That's a great one. And then this one here is called I love this one so much, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And I'm holding that up as well.
And in fact, that is in our reading list, our recommended reading list.
Yes.
The Power of Habit. It's powerful, right?
Oh my
It's
gosh.
great. It's
It's
great.
huge. It's
And
huge.
a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about today comes from that book.
Yeah. And then there's some podcasts out there. There's
Sure.
one of the ones that I love to hear. It's I listen to, it's called Hidden Brain by NPR. And now some of you folks might listen to this and think about NPR. Sometimes NPR can get a little bit political. But this particular podcast, it's very rare when they do that. So get out of your brain the fact that it's NPR, but it's done really, really well. They interview a lot of great people, tell stories, and it's done really professionally.
Yeah.
So I recommend that particular podcast. So anyway, let's talk about why the habits are important. We're going to go through some of these really, really quickly, and it may surprise you and that how important these are. And the other thing is that it's vital for you guys to understand that habits are so important to how we do things and achieve things, like you said, Larry. And so it's worth understanding. It's worth spending the time devising, developing, and breaking habits in order to support and help you create the life that you want.
Yeah.
So here's a couple of things about it. All right. So one of the podcasts, the one I referred to there in Hidden Brain, one of the episodes, and we'll link that in the show notes, they talked about 43% of our daily actions are habitual.
Yep.
43%, almost half of our actions are habitual. We rely on habits to execute so many things. So it only makes sense for us to be controlling those, to designing those and creating those.
Yeah.
You think about the habit that we have on this podcast, and I have pretty much the same opening every single time. Well, there's a reason for that consistency, but a reason for that is that our brains are built for habits. Okay. Our brains are built because one of the things that happens is when we are executing unconsciously or out of our habits, our brains aren't working as much.
Can I put it a different way, Dave?
Yeah.
Our brain is constantly searching for patterns.
Yes.
Okay. And so often if we came on every time it was a different opening to the podcast, people that, what am I listening to here?
Yeah.
Right. So it's constantly searching for patterns.
The familiar.
The familiar. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the things that I wanted to show about this and why we're searching for the familiar is because we can make decisions quicker.
Yes.
And really our brains take even though it's like, Larry, I think I can't exactly remember, like it's only like 10% of our body mass, but they take up, I don't know, 50% of our energy or whatever, our brain. It just uses a tremendous amount of energy. And as you know, as we have evolved over, a whole bunch of years, we haven't had food supply as ample as it has been. So our bodies are designed to conserve energy. We store fat when we may not want to, right? And so our brains will want to save energy as well. Yeah. And by looking for patterns and cues and then getting into these habits, our brains, kind of turn down. In fact, here's you guys see on this podcast, if you're watching the video, you'll see it, but this is great, right straight from the book. Yeah. So the top figure is they took some what are they electrodes and put them in a rat's brain as it was going through a maze, and the top picture shows all this brain activity. It's really spiking up. This is as they first learn it. Well, about a week later at the bottom, there's a lot of activity at the beginning when they're searching for that pattern, that cue, find that cue. Then when they're executing the routine, the brain energy and activity goes way, way down. Okay. And then at the end, when we get the reward, that's when the brain energy goes back up because we want that reward.
Think about when you're driving a car. Most people who are listening to this have driven a car before, and maybe you do drive a car. I can think of times where I've left my house because I'm such a creature of habit. I know where my car is parked. I know what I need to do. There'll be times I'll be driving down the street and I'll reflect back for a second. I don't even remember. I got an electric car. I don't even remember unplugging the car. I don't remember getting in the car. I don't remember going out of my driveway because it's so habitual.
Yes.
The same thing over and over and over again. Yeah. Right. And that's because the brain is just on autopilot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because it's built that way. So that's one thing that's so important to recognize is that we are on autopilot, according to some of the statistics, 43% of the time.
Yeah.
Right. Including driving a car. I mean, there's so many other things. The other aspect of it is that, because our brains use so much energy and we really have only so much like willpower, decision-making capability, it makes sense for us to conserve it when we can. Yeah. An example would be is a lot of you, especially myself, as I've got great brain energy and decision-making capability at the beginning of the day, but at the end of the day, depending upon what's gone on, it's like I'm burnt, I'm dust. I can't hardly think about certain things, and I've got to recover. So it makes sense to build as many things habitually as you can to save that energy, so you can have that decision making. Be able to do that as much as possible. Larry, in fact, I know some folks, they will wear the same thing every day. They will eat the same thing for every meal. Like I eat the same smoothie for breakfast every morning, and I'm thinking about other things as I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So, it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, and this is why when you're learning something new, Dave, or if you're in a time of crisis where your brain is dealing with things that it's never dealt with before, you may have not even moved from a chair all day, but you feel physically and emotionally exhausted at the end of the day because you're dealing with new things that your brain has never dealt with.
Yes.
Before.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're right. From a physiological perspective, this is why the brain wants to find patterns so that it's not expending as much energy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so this is really great if you're trying to build a new habit, you're trying to reach a new physical goal in your life, develop a new professional level of success. This is why habits are so darn important.
Yeah. Yeah. And, another real big reason why they're important is they will help us do things that we don't want to do, but we know we need to do. That's when you design it that way, for example, exercise. And we'll talk all along. That's one of the key things, keystone habits. We'll talk about that and how to help yourself. But a little hint there is, if you do little things like laying your exercise clothes out the night before, then you get up and you don't even have to think. This is the way I do it. I get up, I don't think, I just go in the bathroom and put these clothes on. But if I have to start making decisions about what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go, what I'm going to wear, what I'm going to drink, all that stuff, then those are barriers. And I don't want to use my brain energy for that. I want to have these little things cue me into that habit of getting off my butt and exercising.
That's right. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So one of the other reasons that's important is, we are, like we talked about, we're built for habits. And if we're going to have the habits, we need to have habits that are actually driving us, fueling us, helping us get what we want. Because if we don't establish those habits, then there's going to be habits that are just going to happen anyway. We might as well take control of them, because you can have a habit every morning of eating a donut and a cup of coffee for your breakfast, or you can have a healthy breakfast smoothie every morning. You can do it either way. Both can be a habit, and it's important then that you just take control of them. So we naturally do habits anyway because our brains want to save energy.
Right.
It's just the way we are.
Yep.
So we might as well take control of them and understand that.
Yeah, that's really good.
The other thing too is, from a business perspective, this is really, really important, Larry. And I think people don't realize it. We always we think about habits. I mean, exercise is one of the habits that we, that people use as an example, but our organizations have habits. The cultures that we have in our families, the organizations that we're leading, our companies have organizational habits as well. And it's just like the way we are. If we don't establish those, if we don't take control of those, then somebody else is going to, and it may not be what you want.
That's a really great point about the business side. You and I have both, we own businesses, we consult with businesses, we coach and train folks on businesses, like the financial success of your organization. I know that we've got a lot of business owners who listen to this podcast, but sadly, one of the most difficult things to get people to do when they're in a small business is to regularly prepare financial statements for their businesses. You and I were just talking about this the other day. If like you do it one month and then you skip it for a few months and you try to do it another month, it's always a pain in the rear. And it seems like it takes so much energy and you get frustrated. But if, like in our hotel company where we are like militant, we do it every day. We do mini financials, like what happened the night before. Right. And then we string those together to create monthly financial reports. It becomes very easy because it's a habitual part of our organization. And so I can, talk to Ann and say, hey, can I see the financials for this month? Let's say it's the 5th of the month. Boom, they're there. Yeah. If you've never done that before, you're scrambling, and it takes a lot more brain energy and emotional energy to get the darn thing done. Yeah. So I know that we keep using the exercise one. But I want, and it's important, but because it is one of those keystone habits for sure. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on, but don't forget that, like you said, Dave, it's so important to build organizational habits as well. As a leader, it should be a habit for you when you walk in the door. If you have a team members, it should be a habit of walking the 4 corners, touching base with your team members. I had a conversation with one of our general managers recently. It should be a habit for this person that before they even walk in the door, they walk the perimeter of the building, because as soon as you walk in and you put your briefcase in your office, you're going to get stuck there. So it should be habitual to do things before you start the day. And these are habits. And the thing that these things that you're talking about, Larry, they sound like a lot of work. Well, they kind of are initially. Yes. Initially, but once they are established and you do it the right way, it becomes like clockwork. And the other thing about why habits are so important is if we're using our unconscious part of our brain, then we are executing way, way, way faster. I think it is in The Power of Habit. I think it is where he talked about what Tony Dungy did as a coach in his Super Bowl winning year for the Indianapolis Colts, as he established habits in people's brains. He taught them to look for, like the defensive linemen, and they taught them to look for little cues on how the offensive lineman was going to shift his arm or his shoulder or something like that. And then they would just react. They wouldn't even think. And so it allowed them to be very, 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 very fast on the field. Yeah. So we think that setting up the financial stuff like you talked about, it's a lot of work up front,
but doing it on a regular basis, it isn't as bad. It really isn't as bad as you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as organizational habits, a great example is what Tony Dungy did with the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah.
They broke through and finally won a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. And one of the things that they did that was awesome, he worked with the team to start looking at cues, so they would recognize a cue, and then they would go into a routine of looking at, say, an offensive lineman's, if they're a defensive lineman, looking at an offensive lineman's body, how he moved, et cetera,
Yeah.
so that they were able then to react, as you mentioned, Larry. They were able to react much faster and quicker, and that's what happens when we get these habits going unconsciously. We just execute, and we can execute a lot faster.
Right.
I remember this habit that drove me nuts in my former company that I was in, semiconductor company. It drove me nuts as people were late to meetings.
Oh, geez.
Oh my gosh. It would be I always like to get there on time, and I used the time to connect with people. That was okay. But you never knew what started. 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, and it really was driven from the top down. So it became a habit, and then pretty soon people aren't even showing up, on time. Everybody gets there 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late. Nobody thinks it's a big deal. So habits happen in our organizations pretty easily, Larry.
It's so interesting you should say that. I don't sleep sometimes and try to put myself to sleep. I do what I tell others not to do. And then I'll have the TV on, right, to kind of talk me to sleep. I know you can keep your emails. You don't need to be sending texts. I know I should not have any screen time for an hour. So do as I say, not as I do. But anyway, last night there was the TV show Bar Rescue. If you guys have ever seen this, but John Tapper was dealing with a hotel it was actually a bar at a hotel in Florida. And there was a cultural habit of people, not even employees, not even looking or caring about what the schedule was. People would habitually come in 15 minutes late or an hour late. One girl one day when they were there came in 4 hours late, right? Because there was not the culture of making sure that people were there on time.
Yeah.
And so what happens in that kind of an organization? If there's this lackadaisical kind of culture of not showing up to meetings on time, maybe coming in for your shift, maybe not, then just things throughout the entire organization become lax.
Yeah.
Right? There's no accountability.
Yeah.
So some of these habits are about personal accountability.
Yeah. And in fact, one of the things that successful organizations and successful people do is they set up their environments for their success.
Yes. There you go.
So like one of the things that you can do, this is kind of a hint, maybe goes in another episode, but one of the things that you can do is set your environment up to help you avoid temptation, avoid the cue to even start. We'll talk about that probably in the next one, but I one of the things that I realized, Larry, is my mom was staying with us over the holidays, and we have candy out for decorations around the holidays. We buy the Christmas decorated candy or whatever. And she would be walking by with her walker and look over at this candy dish and then take a couple pieces of candy, and then she'd go and keep going. And it's like, well, she wouldn't do that if the candy wasn't sitting there.
Well, I admit that I got suckered into it last night after dinner at your house.
Yeah,
that thing was sitting right in front of me.
It's just sitting there in that beautiful packaging. Right?
I hate you. Yes.
So that's one of the things that we want to emphasize too, is set your environment up for success, both helping you to encourage to do things that you want and to discourage things that you don't want. That's a quick example.
Yeah.
So that's a really a good summary, I think, of why habits are important. So much of your success and failure is going to be attributed to habits, when basically half of your decision making that you're doing throughout the day is because of your habits.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, you've talked about this before. You're really good at explaining this. It was Noah St. John, where we talked about how things are processed faster.
Yeah.
And we move from the unconscious to the conscious. Do you want to explain that process to people? I think that might be beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, be happy to. So,
you've done a great job. When we, by the way, Dave and I, for those folks who don't know, we run masterminds where entrepreneurs, leaders, and high achievers get together.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, Dave, you've explained this really well a couple of times to our mastermind members.
Yeah. So think about, as I talk about this, think about, Larry, what you brought up before was driving a car, right? Learning how to drive a car.
Yeah.
So we really start when we're learning things and building habits. We really come to the start off at unconscious incompetence.
Yeah. Get your brain around that.
Yeah.
Unconscious incompetence.
So it's basically we don't know what we don't know. So think about driving a car. I remember when I was 12 or 13, telling my dad, "You need to drive like this. You're driving bad." Blah blah blah. Oh, well, I don't. That looks so easy to me, right? Because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. And then it goes to more like where you're consciously incompetent. You're like, oh my gosh, when you're starting to drive yourself, you get in there, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a lot harder than I thought. I don't know. What are the steps? I like, do I put my seatbelt on first? When do I put the key in? We got to have the radio on. So you're consciously thinking, oh my gosh, this is really a lot harder than I thought. And you don't understand that, or you start understanding that you don't know.
You start understanding there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. And what's really important to know about this stage at learning something is it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
And we want to say, screw this driving, or screw learning the accounting that we want to do, or screw setting up our financial statements like we said, because it's just too much trouble. Oh, it's too hard.
Right? And this is the point where people oftentimes quit. They quit, frankly, before they even get across the starting line. Okay. Yeah. And there's a psychological term called, it's very descriptive, the hell with it. Like literally, that's what to hell with it syndrome.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, but that's it, right? Because this is more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And so why even try?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's ways that we've learned to get around that. And maybe we'll talk about that in another podcast episode or anyway. So you start off at unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. Then you go to conscious incompetence, where you know what you don't know. Then the next level is conscious competence,
right?
Where you start knowing things and you know how to do it, but you have to think it through. So like driving a car, especially if you hopefully there's not too many people probably that know how to do a stick anymore, right? Drive a manual transmission.
My son, who is 17, intentionally wanted to get a manual transmission car. And so we did. And it's very interesting as we're talking about it, because I could see him talking himself through, okay, I'm approaching a hill. I need to start doing this. I'm starting to come up to a stop sign. You can see the wheels spinning. He's consciously building those neural pathways in his brain to become more competent.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
Yeah. And as he did it, the more and more and the more he did it, there were those neural pathways started getting a groove in them that led to the next phase, which is
unconscious competence.
Right.
Yeah. So this is a great example of how powerful our brains are, because if you just take that little example of driving a manual transmission, getting in a car, Larry, you talked about you get in a car and you go, and so all of a sudden you're there somewhere. So what happens is, think about all the steps to do a manual, drive a manual transmission car. You open the door, you get in, you got to put your seatbelt on. Then you want to make sure you got to step on the brake, put the clutch in, turn the key, make sure you're in neutral. And then it's different if you're on a hill or not, right? With the emergency brake, that's painful. Yeah. And then you can't leave out the radio. Got to turn the radio on, listen to the favorite tune. All right. And then it's like, okay, I still have my clutch in. Now I'm going to shift into first gear. Well, first gear is, let me look at the pattern on the little knob. Is first of the top left, or where is that? So it's the top left, and then you got to start gradually bringing the clutch out and putting the gas on. But then you got to check your mirrors while you're doing that, watch your speedometer, and then look at people, around you. If you're backing up, look behind you.
Didn't have a lot.
So it's a lot of stuff, right? And so our brains are so powerful that pretty soon we don't have to think about it when we go, like what you said, Larry, to unconscious competence. We hardly even have to think about it. We just do it.
That's right.
And we do it like that. It's so fast.
And it's interesting, if you just push through this conscious incompetent phase, the to hell with it syndrome, your brain very quickly moves into this unconscious competence phase. And in fact, during one of the masterminds, Dave, do you remember we showed this movie of the study, or not a movie, a little video clip of a study that was done. I think it was done in the UK, where they did the reverse.
The
upside down glasses.
Yeah.
Right. Where they had people wear these glasses that flipped everything upside down, and they measured how long did it take for the brain to get accustomed to that. Everything from riding a bicycle to writing their name. And it happened pretty quickly once they got through the uncomfortable phase.
Yes.
Right. And it switched back even quicker when they took them off.
Yes. And so that's a key point about habits and why habits are important, and you got to take control of them. Because if you say you're trying to break a habit and maybe replacing it with something else, if you're not careful, you can go back very quickly to the old.
That's correct. That's right.
Right. And that's a great example of that, Larry.
Yeah.
So that's why habits are important. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Wait till our next episodes, man. We're going to give you so much good information, stuff that's helped us in our lives.
Yeah.
And we're still learning and we're still growing, even at our advanced age.
Hey, I resemble that. Yeah.
All right, Larry, any final thoughts before we end this?
Yeah, I would just say push through. I'm going to put an emphasis on this. Push through the conscious incompetence phase. That's where all the discomfort comes, and much of the discomfort comes in our lives. And imagine had you just not switched into the to hell with it phase, but you pushed through the discomfort. How different would your life be? Well, we have to be recording this in early January 2022, and it's a good time just to start thinking about it. It's now the time to be developing some new habits. You know, some people, me in particular, are calling 2021 the Great Reset.
Yeah.
Right? What are we resetting for 2022? Right? You've had plenty of time to think about what happened in 2021. All right, let's push through the discomfort just through the next few weeks, and you're going to see great change in your life. Yeah. If you don't, how's that working out for you? If you're accepting the bad habits in your life right now, how's that working out for you? You know, for a lot of us, shame builds up around that, and it's one of those really low vibrational emotions that we don't need. Let's push through.
Well, we're going to talk about some of those habits that you guys can develop and work on. And of course, it's important to be part of our, our course and community.
That's right.
Where we can help each other. We can talk about our morning routines. We can talk about in the Q&As. It's like you can ask, how do I establish this habit over here? I'm always doing this or that, you know? So a lot of times you need other people around you, especially when you're trying to do that. And our course and community will help you do that. And of course, we're all about getting virtual assistants and having them help us get freedom in our lives. So we've also got a white glove service where we can find a rock star VA for you, or you can come into our course and learn how to get a VA that can actually help you offload some of these, establishing some of these habits, and actually help you be accountable. And we'll talk about that in a future episode.
Sure.
But we've got a couple of things that we want you to do right now, and we really appreciate it. Number one, subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already done so. And then on YouTube, do it there as well. Hit the subscribe button and click on the little bell next to it. Hopefully get some reminders. And then number two, give us a rating wherever you're at, preferably a 5-star. Leave us a comment somewhere below the video, any comment, because it helps us to get the word out on what we're doing, because we really just love helping folks. And then the third thing is go to HireMyVA.com. You can get more information on our course and community, some of our free downloads that we got there, which are growing, and we've got great plans for this quarter. So go to HireMyVA.com. And remember, though, even without experience, you'll learn how to prepare for, hire, and thrive with virtual assistants. We want to help you. We're helping a bunch of folks, and just come on in and join us. Dip your toe in the water, have some fun with us.
I prefer you jump in full force. Don't dip your toe in the water. But do yourself a favor, do the world a favor. Go do something significant today. All right. God bless you. God keep you. God hold you. All right, my friends, go get them. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.